Thanks. Hello, Simon.
Hi, John.
Here we are for our third Chaplain's Chat conversation, and this time you're in the hot seat. And we're reflecting and thinking about the theme of the week, which is opening up to God. And obviously, there is the context of the last year, which is very specific and very, very unique for us all to think about. But I know folks would be interested not only in that from your perspective, but how that fits into your faith journey, your prayer journey, your spiritual journey over a period of time, um, as an individual within the church and as an ordained vicar within the church. So what I'm saying is we can talk about virtually anything along the way, which I think would be good. So perhaps we can start, and you could tell us a little bit about how you end up where you are. How did you end up being the chaplain at the University of Gloucestershire? What's that road been?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So I was a vicar for 26 years. Before that, I was a teacher for 4 years. So during that time, I guess I was always trying to listen to what the next step might be. So I was very pleased when I stopped being a teacher because I wasn't terribly keen on that. But I was listening. I used to pray very hard on Friday nights that maybe this wasn't the right thing for me to be doing. Went off and trained and became a vicar in different places. And I generally really enjoyed that. It was very demanding. It was 6 days a week, usually morning, afternoon, and evening. But it was also very involving. The church is a community. That's the way I see it. And then when you're relating to that community, you build up over time. And the last two places I was in, I was there about 10 years. You build up this really strong bond with that community. You go through lots of different events together. Just standing in the church, relating to the group of people who are there on a Sunday morning. It's something very precious. So I did really love that. But I was aware that I've been in the last place coming, towards 10 years. I thought, well, I could stay another 9 years. That might be too long for them and for me. And so I started just thinking about what I might do. And I go on retreats, and I'll talk about those later perhaps. And often on a retreat, it's a time when I reflect and I think, what next? Is there a next? What might it be? And one of the things that came to me was, it feels like it's going to be smaller, not bigger. It's not going to be going to a sort of like bigger and bigger church and doing, more and more church things. But I still wasn't really sure. And I was very lucky. I had a sabbatical, so I had 3 months off the job.
Yeah.
And as part of that, I went on a 2-week pilgrimage along the North Wales coast to Bardsey Island. And just before I went, I took I just on a whim printed off some little cards with a very simple prayer: "Calm me, O Lord, as you calm the storm," and put them in my wallet. And I noticed that I had lots of conversations. People didn't know I was a vicar, but on this walk, I would be walking on my own, and then I just meet some people, often in a church they happen to be visiting, or just where I was staying the night, have really interesting conversations. And I thought, yeah, this is what I love. I love having conversations with people. And one of the things I do is mentioned actually in the materials for this week 3 that Joe's prepared. And I go through phases, but sometimes I do this thing called the examen, where you look back over the day, at the end of the day, and you reflect on what is most life-giving from that day. Just one thing that's been the most life-giving. So I did that for a while when I was in the parish again. And I put a plus and minus: most life-giving, least life-giving, just 2 or 3 words. And again, I noticed that the most life-giving thing was often a little conversation with somebody down the street. Not all the stuff I was doing in the church, which was meetings and services and organising things and working my study. It was that little conversation. So that, in those sort of ways, it felt like God was reminding me about something which is a deep within me, which is this desire to connect with people. And so I began to think about that and think about how that might be different from working in my church job, as I had been doing, and praying about that, and not being sure what that meant, and having a few ideas. Could it mean hospital chaplaincy, or I didn't quite know. And then actually I had a dream one night. I woke up in the morning, well, it wasn't really a dream. It was just an awareness that came in the middle of the night, and I woke up and I said, "Oh, I just had this dream about becoming a university chaplain at Keele University." where one of our young people from the church had gone, to Sarah and my wife, and I was like, oh, I never thought of doing that. And that hadn't occurred to me. So I got on, the computer. Is there a chaplaincy vacancy? No, they've got a chaplain. Oh, okay. And I had a curate. I was hoping to learn about being a vicar, so I had to stay where I was for a little while. But the seed was planted then, and I thought, my time in university, the chaplaincy was really important. That was a real time of growth for me in terms of my relationship with God. Maybe there's something there. I'm a bit old. I wonder if that will matter. and then I thought, well, I'm just going to have to try it out. Just apply to one or two things. So I applied to the first thing, and they didn't want to know. I thought, oh well. And then I applied here, and got the job. So there was quite a sense of being guided by different experiences I had and the way I reflected on them, and that connecting with something which felt very true to me. And that felt like God was gently leading me in this direction.
That's interesting. And I love the way you said it wasn't a dream, it was an awareness. That sense of, my goodness me, and that's God leading, isn't it? That sort of that many of us are touched by different parts of our lives where we suddenly think, oh, goodness me, what about that then? And then it stays in front of you, doesn't it? It's very hard to move. So that's a kind of overview. But what if we then sort of get underneath that a little bit and think about the sort of the inner journey that you have had? You mentioned retreats, and I'm sure they've been important in your life. And perhaps in terms of opening up to God, you can say something about that.
Yeah. So in many ways, I think my spiritual journey has been a sort of stepping down into a sort of a deeper place. So when I started off, I went to Pathfinder camp and said a prayer, which was about becoming a Christian. I was about, 13 at the time, and it was important, but it didn't go very deep. And my family certainly didn't notice a lot of difference, sadly. And then, I got confirmed. I wasn't sure about it. I put it off for a year. I was very bothered about earthquakes. That was my particular issue. But again, it didn't go very deep. And as I say, when I went to university, I really fought against getting involved in church for a while. I really fought against it. I used to sleep in too long, so the guy used to come and collect me. I couldn't go. I was, oh, no, I'm not up. Sorry. And then eventually got involved with the chaplaincy. And things began to open up to me. So we went on quiet days. We went to monasteries. We went to Iona Abbey, and we were taking it as seriously as you do sometimes when you're with a load of students, which is not very much. But we began to experience things. And then, as I say, I went on. That sort of led me on to think I wanted to offer myself to God, and I thought that would be through teaching. People had suggested getting ordained, but I thought I'd be through teaching, and that turned out not to be the case. And so in the end, I went to college and I got ordained, and God was very involved in all of that, of course. But actually, something happened a bit later on where I've been working I was in my sort of third church in the middle of Lincolnshire. I had 6 different churches that I was looking after, actually. And it was a bit hard work. There wasn't a lot of support from people around. I was really trying to move things forward. It felt quite isolated. I would go and pray on my own in the church every morning, and there wasn't anybody else who would join me for morning prayer. And I hit a bit of a brick wall. And I tried one or two things. I went to a charismatic Anglican renewal conference this weekend, and I've been at a church which had that sort of element in before, and that's a much more on the surface sort of sense of being open to the Spirit. But it didn't really work for me at that point. So, and then I had this chance to go on the first of these retreats. I've been on retreats before, but they'd always been just, I'll go along, take a stack of books, do my own thinking. But these were called individually guided retreats. So you had somebody who met up with you every day and suggested 2 or 3 passages that you could pray with. And then you weren't allowed to take any books. That was a bit of a killer, because you had the book of the Bible and the book of your life. This was at Laund Abbey, a beautiful place in Leicestershire. So the first one I went in, I remember praying with the Psalm 23, which we use today in morning prayer. I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to pray with Psalm 23. I know Psalm 23 inside out. Oh, for goodness sake. And then reflecting back over my whole life, using Psalm 23 as a sort of parallel, and it being, suddenly becoming very profound, and realizing the ways that God had been involved in my life. And so from that point on, I've been going to a retreat like that every year. Some of them longer, some of them shorter. And I felt at that point that I'd begun to reconnect with this inner journey in such a way that the outer journey of being a vicar wasn't the important thing anymore. And when I left that parish, I stood in the pulpit and I did my last sermon. I'm leaving now. I'm going to tell you whatever I want to tell you. And I said, actually, the most important thing that's happened to me in this place has been that I reconnected with my inner journey. So that was the beginning of that. And then shall I carry on? Because I'll just carry on if you know.
Well, I was going to just ask you to focus a little bit on the 30-day retreat, which obviously is but come to that when you're ready.
Okay. Yes. So I carried on with these retreats, and I started going to a place called St Byno's in Wales, in North Wales, a beautiful retreat place, and again working with this idea that somebody guides you in your prayers, working with the Bible in a very different way. So the Bible had always been a problem to me because I argue with it, I get cross with it. There's bits of it that I really don't like. There's other bits that are great. But suddenly there was this way of working with the Bible, like we have been doing in the retreat, where you take a passage and you spend time with it and you read it again and again and you let the particular connection come out of it and you don't force it, and then you work with that maybe just phrase or word, and then you pray with that. And I gradually learned how to do that a bit better. And then I had this opportunity on the same sabbatical as I went on the long walk to go on what they call the 30-day retreat, which is the spiritual exercises. Now I know that you, John, and Joe Parkin have both done the spiritual exercising in daily life, where you spread it out during a whole year, and that's an amazing way to do it. But this was a different way where you did it all in 30 days. So you're in silence for almost all of that 30 days, apart from the beginning when you get into it, the end, and then a couple of days, I didn't even know they were coming, where you were allowed to talk. Yeah. But you're with this group of people. I was with a group of people from around the world. There were nuns from Africa and from Australia. There was a Pentecostal young woman from Hong Kong. There were people from America, but almost all in plain clothes, in this place which is a house of silence. There's no problem keeping silence in St Byno's because that's what people do. So you sit in together meals, you get to know people amazingly well. And in this time, the pattern of the retreat is that you have 4 different weeks, and there's a week where you sort of get into it. There's a week where you look at the life of Jesus, and then there's a week which leads up to sort of the time we're in now, where you're leading up to us what we call the Passion. So the betrayal, and then the crucifixion, and then you move on to the resurrection. But you pray with these stories in a very intense way. I had quite a fierce retreat guy called Ron. Another woman who was on the retreat said she's a bit like a sheepdog. She didn't let us off, so we had to spend 5 times. We had 5 times of prayer a day for maybe 40 minutes, including one in the middle of the night. And then you pray with these passages and particular exercises that St Ignatius, who set up the whole thing, suggested. And I began to find that I could enter into them imaginatively, and my imagination started going mad. And I tried to do this before, I hadn't done it, but suddenly it normally happened when I went for a walk. So I pray with the passage, not get anywhere with it. And then the second time I pray with it, I do my prayer walk, which is about an hour around the back of the hill in Wales. And I find I was in this story, and Jesus was saying these things to me, and it was, I was having these, and part of you thinks, am I going crazy? But it's like God using your imagination to engage with you at a deeper level, so that you're not just in your rational brain, and engaging with you at an emotional level. And it really connected with me, so that the story of Holy Week and Easter has a lot more depth for me now, because I've almost experienced it in a way in my imagination. I've been there in certain of the scenes and felt what it felt like to be there, and lived it in a fuller way. And that had an effect on me. It led in partly to the chaplaincy thing, because part of the imagination was about leading on to wanting to share this, and wanting to. I kept seeing these water tanks in the fields which fed the cattle, and thinking. For the cattle, and thinking they don't all have to go down to one place to have the water. The water goes to where they are. This is a different idea. This is a bit more like chaplaincy rather than being in a church where people all have to go to you. But I also had this sense of this closeness to Jesus that I hadn't had before, And one of the things I came back and I said to Sarah, I said, I had this experience that, the money, the way we think about money, I suddenly realised it's all Jesus's money, which sounds such a naive thing to say, but something had switched, and it keeps wanting to switch back. Something had switched to say, stop taking responsibility for the money. You go around your supermarket trying to save money, and you get fussed if you bash the car and you spend money. It's not your money; it's Jesus's money. And in a way, that is a naive thing to say, but in another way, there was a real shift going on to say you need to let go. You need to stop taking responsibility for things that are not your responsibility, including the church, including my life, including my money, and hand it over. And I'm still trying to live out of that, although I have to keep returning to it, because we do, don't we? But that's been a really important part of my journey that I'm still following, really.
Yes, and you've taken me back, because I can remember when I did it, and it took me 18 months to do it, because I was quite slow, but I was also engaged. But one of the things my spiritual director pushed me to do was to visualize myself inside the stories, and it's the most powerful and moving and emotional thing I've ever done, and it's not left me. I wanted to say to you, those experiences that you had, they've stayed with you, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and they would come back to me when I'd be taking a service in church and saying some words and just remembering them again. And just at this time, because we're coming up to Easter, they're coming up to the surface of my memory again. And really significant, because they led to not just, I fancy this is interesting, but now I recognize that my relationship with Jesus has shifted, or I need to hand this thing over. And I say to people sometimes, you can understand, you can think that that faith is an airy fairy, unpinned downable load of mumbo jumbo type of thing, and I can easily think that. And yet I recognize that the reality about my own life and myself and the world that I came back with was a greater reality. I was more in touch with reality, not less. And I always find that really helpful, because I am a questioning person, and sometimes I'll go on retreat and spend the first day thinking, well, God doesn't exist anyhow, what a waste of time. But which is just how I am, and I'm okay with that. But actually, by the time I come back, I've re-engaged with my reality, and that's important.
Okay, let's then just take a focus on this last year, which has been so many challenges for everybody. But how have you approached this year? How has it impacted your faith journey and your prayer life? What kind of things can you tell us there?
Yeah, so the year, when I look at it for myself, has not been hugely difficult. There have been difficult things. I've really missed seeing people, the whole idea of going to chaplaincy to meet people, meet new people. And we've not been there being able to welcome people. We've just got some people coming in now into the chaplain. We've had them at little bits, but mostly not happened. So that's been really sad, and it's felt a real loss. But my pattern of prayer, in a way, has been strengthened, because I've had a little bit more time since I was morning. So for me, I've sort of evolved this pattern. I told you before we started recording this, and I'll say it now, that a long time ago, 35 years ago, I went to Greenbelt, the festival I still go to now. And a nun came and talked to us about prayer and said, you need something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, which is normally what you say to brides,
Yes.
So something old, some resource that stayed with you, some way of praying that stayed with you. Something new, because our prayer life never stays the same, and it moves on and evolves. Something borrowed, what can you find out there that can resource your prayer life? Something blue, that's about reality. That's about facing the sadness and the brokenness inside, and not hiding that from your prayers. So I still think it's a really helpful little thing to remember. So for me, I in the morning, I try now have 20 minutes quiet. Now, sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes the morning doesn't fit that. I came back from a retreat one year, and I felt that God was saying to me, just have a cup of coffee with me in the morning. I don't actually have a cup of coffee for it, but that was like a thing to say, yeah, I can do this. So I've been learning. It's not easy spending 20 minutes quiet. You have to learn about ways to use your breath and repeat words that you might find helpful. At the moment, I just repeat I am on my breath, and keep coming back to that, and your mind goes everywhere. But that's stilling, that sort of letting go all the time of the thoughts, and just being. You can tell I have a lot of words. It's very important for me to have a time when I don't have words. So that's been really helpful. And when we were more locked down, I really had time for that. And that was, and then that feeds that quietness into the rest of my day. And I'm more aware. So that beautiful time when we had the awareness of the birds and you know, it was a lovely time of year, just a bit later than this time last year. It all fed into that. And I then use I use an app called Pray As You Go, which I know you use as well. Pray As You Go, which is from the same sort of tradition as the Ignatius, where they'll read a reading, they'll guide you in some thoughts about it, some reflections, gentle music, read it again, very much in that way of drawing out from the words of Scripture something. So I do use that. I use it when I'm doing my Pilates exercises, which is a bit weird, but it works for me. So I did that, and that's been a really good thread for me. And then one of the things that really changed was not being able to go to church. And I'm going to be honest here and say that was a mixed thing for us, because going to church sometimes feels hard work, and we've not quite settled fully into feeling a very strong part of a church here in Cheltenham. And it was such a shift and such a loss to leave our last church. So we've started using some prayers by Tess Ward, which I use my midweek prayers now that I do on a Wednesday, on a Sunday morning, just myself and Sarah. I'm finding that incredibly enriching to be able to do that again together, like we used to when we were young and married and keen, and we used to pray together more. So actually, that's been a real gift. So I'd like to, you know, I can't say that I've been massively hit spiritually, because in a way, having the different space for my own spirituality has been a gift, although obviously other parts of the year have been very challenging. And I think perhaps the gift has helped me with the challenge, is what I'd say. So that, yeah,
there's a lovely echo there to part of the conversation I had with Sarah last week when we were talking about church, and I think I made the point, church is where you find it. And it might not be in the big building down the road. It could be, as you say, with you and Sarah on a Sunday morning, just working together, and that's where church is for you. And, and that's so important. And what about, you've talked about awareness, you've talked about how you became a vicar. Can you talk broadly as well about this whole idea of God calling us? Because God calls us in so many different ways.
For me, I think calling has become more and more important, but it's become small, if you like. So, you know, we have this idea of God calls us in a great big way, and we hear this big voice. Well, I have had a couple of times like that, one to do with being ordained as a vicar and one to do with coming here. And that, you know, so they have been really helpful. The one being ordained as a vicar, I woke up early in the morning and suddenly had this thing. I was trying to work out what to do, which was, well, you care about people becoming Christians and you care about people growing in their faith. It was like, duh. Come on, this is obviously the thing for you. So occasionally it appears that my brain is so complicated that God has to sort of wait until I'm asleep to tell me things. But I think as time's gone on, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. When I was younger, I used to think I've got to change the whole world. And then, I can't change the whole world. But if I'm a vicar, then I can help people grow in their faith and they can change the whole world. And then it's like, maybe that's not even it. Maybe I need to let go and stop being the one who's trying to do everything and listen to just the thing that God is calling me to do. And then that might be on a daily basis, to try and live with an openness that says, if there's a space in my day, and I'm not good, I don't like having spaces in my day, but if there's a space in my day, that is an opening for me then to listen and say, okay, I'll go and talk to those folks. I'll start this conversation. We'll talk about this. There's somebody I could just notice there. There's somebody I could contact here. So actually, I've moved from the big calling to the sort of smaller. How is God calling me each day? And I think the other thing I'd say about calling is that I think your bigger callings connect with your deepest desires. So I believe that God uses our deepest desires. So when we're trying to find the big callings, we listen to what is the longing of my heart? What would I love to do? What is that telling me? And we cover it over with lots of superficial desires that muddy the waters. But if we get to our deepest desires, that's where God is deeply calling us. And then we live out of that, and then we listen for the smaller callings.
And I think as you've spoken that, I just was thinking then about your work as a chaplain. in the sense that you never know quite who's going to come through that door. Someone who would profess to you immediately say, well, I haven't got a faith, and others who come in who've got a life history of having a faith. And how do you find that you're able to work with all these different people coming through and helping them sort of work with their faith?
I think that's one of the things I really love, because I do believe that we all have the capacity for this inner journey. And that is true, even if we've not got a faith tradition, or certainly if our faith tradition is different. And I'm not somebody who believes that the only way to find that is to become a Christian. So I love the roots of my own faith, and I do believe that's a way to engage with God. And if people want to enter into that, that's brilliant, and I want to support them in that. But I also just love having conversations with people where, first of all, it's about welcome. First of all, it's about saying you are welcome, and I've noticed you. And we communicate so much by simply giving people attention. So people come into the space here, and you give them attention in a gentle, loving way. And over time, you build up a relationship where you may have the opportunity to listen to them. And again, deeply listening to somebody is such a gift of love. And once you're doing that, then you can begin to have maybe deeper conversations, and conversations that may enable them to do some reflecting, some sort of deeper thinking, some opening up to themselves. And I think if we want to open up to God, we have to begin by opening up to ourselves, actually. So it is different in every case, and you don't know how that will go. And I marvel at the potential of conversation, and where that may lead. And I think I want to say I want to value every conversation, even if it seems really superficial, because it isn't, because you're engaging with somebody. And Joe read that lovely, or gave us a lovely poem about how each person is holy ground. When we have a conversation with somebody, they are holy ground, and we approach them in that way. So that's what I want to be like. Of course, I'm a human being, and there are times when I think I want to get on with this, and somebody wants to talk to me, or there's that person who I find a bit annoying, because we're human beings. But I think that that's what I long for, that sort of way of engaging with people.
And I suppose you're absolutely right. That, and I think all of us in chaplaincy, we see that as, and we're so passionate about it, and that we've had that taken away a little bit this last year. So there's a slice of our life that we want back. I know that's true. I think we probably need to come to an end. So I'm going to finish by saying, as part of the next closing conversation, say whatever you like and pick up anything. But I wanted to also come right back to the beginning when you said you started out as a teacher. And I wanted to remember that Jesus was a teacher, and I wanted to then get you to talk about you as still being a teacher, but in a different way.
Well, yeah, so the interesting thing before was when I was teaching English. I liked reading books, but I didn't care whether people could write in perfect sentences. So that was a poor beginning, really. I wasn't really bothered. I was interested in the pupils, but not interested in what I was teaching. I think what Jesus did was, when he taught people, the teaching came from him. It wasn't teaching he got off a shelf or a book. And I've got rid of lots of my books over the years, mainly because I should never have bought them, because I've got too many. But I've still got some precious books. But I think it's about our lives are the stuff out of which we teach. And I felt that what you do as a vicar is you say you walk with the church, and you say, here am I, trying to walk with God, trying to walk a life of grace. And that is my gift to this church, that I will do it openly, and you can share, you can see that that's what's going on. And that's, so in a way, it's all about, our openness to God's work in us as the frail and often broken people that we are, and letting that out. And that's where the teaching comes from. And then as we do that, there's things we pick up along the way. And I try and remember that if I've got a little group or something I'm doing with, something will be given to me. It may be just a very short, I could use that, or there's a nice song, or whatever. I don't have to work too hard at it, because it will be given to me, and it will connect with this thing about, my own experience of God and my life, and hopefully connect with their life. So that's what I'm trying to do now, I guess. It's a little bit different from when I was a teacher, and they no longer get their little pens and take the middle out of them and get a little bit of piece of paper and go like they used to do from the back of the class, which is great.
Don't encourage the congregation or give them ideas, Simon. Thank you so much. There's an incredible richness in all the things you said, and I think people will take a lot from this. So thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, John. That's wonderful to have the opportunity.